invite three founders, Ravi Saraogi from Uniphore, Madhu from Kreditbee, and Ajith from Delhivery to come on stage, please. And this is the Profitable Growth Panel, and we're going to talk about, these are all companies that have gone well past a certain scale in terms of profit as well as in terms of revenue, and this is really a lot more of a discussion around that. Actually, we're missing a clock in the front, but you guys feel free to time me out from a timing perspective. I think we're trying to keep everything on schedule. So I'm going to cut to the chase. Each of you has built what is really pretty special in India, which is a large scaling company that actually makes money or is very close to making money. Maybe just take 1 minute and describe your company, what is it that you do today, and also talk about how would you, the way you've gotten to where you have today, if you had to look back on a couple of phases of growth, right? 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100. In a nutshell, what would that be for each of your companies? And let's just start there. So Ajith, we can go with you. For those of you who may not know a whole lot about Delhivery, Ajith, maybe you can summarize where you are as a company as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Delhivery is today India's largest supply chain and logistics company. We started way back in 2012 with a focus on e-commerce logistics. Back then, e-commerce was a sector which had just really come into beginning. 2011 I think is when Flipkart raised its first funding. We started in 2012. What started then as a sort of a logistics company which would service e-commerce, which would use technology to actually make the flow of information highly visible, more efficient, etc., has today morphed into India's largest logistics company.
And what is you guys are public, so you're about $1 billion in revenue?
We are more than $1 billion in revenue, just about more than $1 billion in revenue. Now spread out actually across the entire logistics supply chain. So we do e-commerce logistics, we do normal B2B freight, part truckload, full truckload, we do cross-border, we have warehousing, so pretty much every single need that that any kind of client has is what we do. So I think our journey, in a sense, has been simple in terms of the principles that we laid out in the beginning of our journey, which is that we genuinely believed that technology and data should be the decision-making drivers and the things which actually create value in logistics, because logistics and supply chain for clients is a cost, right? So can you be more efficient, more reliable, create the visibility? The answer to all these three things in our view, the differentiator at least, would lie in technology and the use of data, right? So we've stayed true to that principle across different problem statements, right? We started out with the problem statement saying that e-commerce logistics is non-existent or very difficult in India. The problem statement has changed over a period of time as we've added more business, but the principles have remained the same. In terms of what I think have been sort of defining moments for us, I think a few things, right? One is from an external standpoint, I think GST coming in and making India a single market, right, was a very important one for all logistics companies, and I'll tell you why. Typically, the problem before GST in India was that logistics networks were defined by tax optimization rather than by how movement should happen, right? And hence the need in a sense for national level players to emerge outside of maybe e-commerce logistics, where that need was always there, but otherwise it was not really there, because locally you could be efficient. Anyway, people were optimizing for tax, right? So that changed, right? It also, I think, in a slightly different way, it also opened up the possibility of our clients or the general sort of industry thinking about logistics and supply chain as a cost and a strategic lever, rather than simply thinking about it as, how do I procure my trucks for the lowest cost, right? So it became a total cost thing. So I think those are, at least that's one. COVID, of course, has been in general, a very big event for all of logistics, including e-commerce, right? And I think that's the other event which I think changed a lot of how we operate or how our clients operate, right? So externally, I think those have been the two large events. I think internally, we've always, I think nothing's changed from a perspective of what we set out to do. We keep doing that still, and we believe there's a long way to go. The problem statements that we pick up, obviously every couple of years we do pick up a new problem statement and try and build a business around it, which fits in with the overall business.
Got it. So Ravi, just to switch from logistics to SaaS, you guys are approaching closer to 200 million ARR, is that right?
Yeah, about that, yes.
About there. And maybe talk a little bit about what Uniphore does, and you've gone through a few different steps in your journey, and how would you summarize that to get to, because it's a pretty big landmark where you guys are from an ARR perspective, even for an Indian SaaS company, let alone being pretty good at a global level.
First of all, thanks, Bala, for having me over. I look young, but I've been working and enabling Uniphore for the last 16 odd years. Started right after college, joined IIT Madras incubation process, and it was about 2007 odd time frame, and then 2008 is we formally incorporated. Uniphore can be divided in its journey into two different eras, right? We are a pre-startup, pre-funding, pre-VC kind of a startup of sorts, which started back in 2008, where there was hardly any ecosystem, let alone funding. Even the word startup was, I don't think, was not coined in India at that time, at point in time. So for us, the early part of our journey was largely providing speech tech with an amalgamation of AI even back then. And the kind of focus that we had was to deliver a B2B2C kind of applications to enterprises, largely in services mode. So we deliver custom applications. And then over a period of 6-7 years, as we did that continuously, we found that there are enough and more repeatable use cases, etc., which we could productize. And deep down inside, we always wanted to build a deep tech, enterprise-grade AI or deep tech organization out of India, which is made in India but built for the world. Right? And 2015 was the time frame, and we kind of thought, okay, enough of what we have done. If you want to really go global, we have to productize. We have to build an enterprise-grade platform, which can be delivered across the market, across different theaters, and take that to the world. So 2015 was a time when we actually pivoted the business. So the new era of Uniphore is roughly about 8-9 years old. What changed for us in the new era of Uniphore is that change became a constant, right? If I have to put it in that ways. So from a services company, the first pivot was to product-based enterprise, 2015, 2016, a SaaS product enterprise. 2017 is when we went international. 2018 is when we went US. 2019, we raised we coined the term conversational AI, which some of the big analysts organization picked up. And we have done a lot of firsts in our lives, right, which we have not seen otherwise. And then COVID struck, we found opportunities for us to either build, buy, or partner. And all through, we figured out that in a tech that we are in, to develop something with speech or AI or emotion or tonal, etc., will take multiple years. So we started looking at what options do we have either to partner or buy, and over the course of last 3 odd years, Uniphore has gone acquired in 5 or 6 different enterprises and put that into an ecosystem of tech for us, which just enables us to go and leapfrog in terms of tech and GTM strategies. So if you look at the new era of Uniphore, we have kind of ensured that change is constant.
Yeah.
And we realize that if we don't pivot and don't pivot fast, someone else will take the market share anyways.
Right.
So might as well just do it. It's been tough. We've grown really rapidly over the last 3-4 years. But it's been some journey. If I have to do it over again, I probably do it in 8 instead of 16. That I can say for sure.
So I want to use that as a segue to go to Madhu. Madhu, as a company, you're the youngest of the lot here. Obviously, you're an Arkham portfolio company, but hitting 250 million in the time frame you guys have done in terms of revenue and making money on a monthly basis is pretty amazing. So why don't you, summarize the company and how you feel about the phases of your growth?
Yeah, sure. Well, the company is youngest, but Ajith here has been my batchmate in engineering, so we go a long way back.
No, I'm not taking any sides on who's how old over here. Yeah.
Okay. So we started back in 2018. I think the best part was during that time. I mean, it was a typical opportunity what I saw there. There are so many banks in India, right? So the issue with the banking system in India is that the pure concentration of the banking system has been more towards the top of the pyramid. I think I'll start speaking in the language what Bala keeps taking about that pyramid and then talking about the mid-India. So the top of the pyramid is where the banking system is always kind of going after. I mean, let's say all of us probably we receive about 5 to 10 calls in a day asking for whether we need a credit card, whether we want a loan, or whether we want to kind of open up a mutual fund account or demat account or anything of that sort. Now we find it irritating in this metros or in this tier 1 cities. The moment you go to the tier 2 and beyond, they don't get such calls. Forget about somebody calling and then trying to give them a loan or anything like that. So they don't even have access to ATMs everywhere. If you have gone, I mean, just imagine going to your hometowns or if you're from tier 2 and beyond cities or your friends, relatives somewhere, the way they operate is the ATMs are there in the branches of the bank. Okay, so they have to walk to the bank branch, and in front of that branch there will be an ATM, right? So that's how the overall mechanism works. And which banks are there? Any guesses on the bank which could be there on tier 2 and beyond? This was only one, SBI, right? So beyond that, none of the private banks which are most efficient, which are more customer friendly, so they don't exist over there. So just looking at this simplistic way how the banking operates, I think we found that there was a huge mid-India, what I resonate with Bala, that it is totally underserved. There was no financial products which were there. I mean, I'm talking back in 2016, 2015 when I was trying to formulate how I should start running this company. So I think it was a wide open problem to be solved, and so we started with this product, which is Kreditbee. Where today we do personal loans or unsecured personal loans. We do business loans, which is micro SME is the target. And recently what we have started is loan against property. And again, the focus is more towards the mid-India segment. I mean, 77-78% of our customers are from that non-metro cities or the non-tier 1 cities is where our customers are from. So that's how we kicked on. I mean, the beauty of that was once we introduced our product, back in 2017, 2018 is when we got this Kreditbee out. I mean, forget about marketing, we didn't even have money to lend out on that particular app. And more than 95-96% of the traffic was totally organic, right? So we didn't even market anyone. People had this wonderful experience with this product. The product market fit was great, and the word of mouth was the only way what we were growing. And entire almost for a year we enjoyed almost like a 0-nil CAC kind of an experience. Anyone would ask me what is CAC, I would roughly say that it is almost to 0. People used to get astonished, and one among that people was even Bala. When I told that this is how my business runs, he never believed me in the first go.
Yeah, no, I think that's a longer, different story. But I just want to, it's a profitability panel. I have a question on profitability, and I'd like to take it a bit differently for the two of you versus Ravi, because the businesses are a bit different. But Ajith and Madhu, when you look at it in India, is profitability a mindset that you start with as a young company, or is it an outcome of a strategy or investor pressure at some point? And Ravi, I want to ask you the same question slightly differently, but why don't you guys start? Because both of you have gotten there, But just talk about how did you think about it, because that's not the way every startup thinks. A lot of people are still in a, hey, I first need to, my strategy is to acquire customers and figure out later how to make money.
Yeah. So I think slightly different thing for us. We are not a B2C startup, and that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
So the whole concept of acquiring a client and sort of then becoming profitable doesn't really work for us. We are a network and efficiency business. So from our perspective, unit economics is something which has always been important from day one, right? Because in our business, we establish a certain network size, and then you start filling it up, and then you grow it incrementally, right? So it's a business where operating leverage is high, but your right to even be in the market is actually defined by the size of the network that you have, right? So the minimum kind of barrier is a little higher. So our need to raise capital or to even make paper losses were not defined as much by a need to sort of acquire clients, right, as by the network.
Right.
Pricing, hence, is a decision that we're very careful about. We've always been very careful about. To your question, hence, you know, it is not a function of when we decide to be profitable. It's a function of what we build for, and the unit economics is what has been always what we built for, the right unit economics.
So you optimize the business around the need for...
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Madhu, how about from a Kreditbee perspective?
No, I think since lending is the core business what we run, I don't think we had a lot of choice of not making profits. I mean, if you really look back, right, lending has been there in India for like thousands of years. Banks are operating for hundreds of years. I mean, lending is the only business for the banks which adds to their bottom lines. So really you don't have an option to be there in lending as a business. Maybe we are doing digitally acquiring the customer and underwriting, but the fundamentals of the business always remain same. In that, you have to get profitable at certain level of disbursement on a monthly disbursement, because lending is like two kinds of business. One set of businesses are built on disbursements or the rate at which you disburse on a monthly basis. The second one is on AUM builder, the assets under management, how much you build on. So at certain levels of disbursement or certain level of AUM, the lending business has to make profits. And if you are actually not doing that after certain really good levels, then probably there is a fundamental problem in the overall business model itself. Now, having said that, I think today probably 6 out of 10 lending startups or lending companies or new age lending companies are profitable, right? So now the overall thing for us has been, I mean, we achieved profitability back in FY19, right? So I think we have been profitable since then, barring the COVID period. But now the questions are very different. I mean the tables have turned for me to look at the quality of profit. I mean these are some of the terms what the startup magazines or media will start writing about it. I mean it's about like what is the quality of the profit. The second is the ROE, what you generate is the second set of problems what we are solving. So in that ways, I think for lending, I don't think companies or me have a choice of not generating profits, because there's like hundreds of or thousands of companies in the world in lending have proven that it is a profitable business. Only the digital lending, the way we did was we just took a path little more digital in terms of onboarding, underwriting, but fundamentals definitely remain same there. Yeah.
Same. So Ravi, same question but differently for a SaaS company, right? Which is, everybody looks at it, at least from the outside. I mean, if these guys thought about a 70% gross margin business or whatever it is, it looks amazing. But there is a curve. You initially have to invest a lot more in sales and marketing and R&D. For Uniphore, given that you went through these phases, right, how did you guys evolve in your thinking about profitability? When do you turn the tap off your margin, etc.?
First of all, you are right that the initial investments, especially in a deep tech setup, right, the mindset is very, very critical to ensure that you're investing in the right set of tech talent to get your product and platform up and running, and then the GTM motions around it. So if you look at the balance sheet, the biggest investments are either in tech or GTM.
Yeah.
All other support functions take a back seat.
Right.
Now, when you talk about tech and the talent part of it, how do you align the gross margins? And if you look at, for a company which aspires to go public, how do you get on the right side of the rule of 40? Is very, very critical.
Yeah.
These days, even rule of 60. So, of course, the gross margins are extremely important. So when you start, you source a lot of different tools to conclude your offering to a customer. But then slowly and gradually, you need to figure out what all external tools that you're using today, you can natively inculcate that into your offering, because every time you pull in something from outside, you're impacting your gross margin.
Yeah.
And the more you sort of then go ahead and build it internally, you turn on the positive. So that's one aspect that is important to be looked at. Day one, getting a customer is very important. Validating your product market fit is very important. So you're not bothered too much about the gross margins of sorts.
Right.
But as you grow slowly and gradually, you go to the Series B level, the C, the D level, the importance of gross margin is extremely important. It's extremely important to be focused on. And that's the time when you are at the C level or D level growth phase to really figure out what you can insource rather than you outsource, what you can build versus buy.
So cost-effective.
Cost-effective measures.
Yeah.
So those are important aspects to be looked at. The second part is how do you constantly look at the CAC to LTV ratio as well, right? So how do you constantly ensure that your lifetime value of a customer increases over time, because your CAC is also increasing over time in a certain way. If you are, depending on your go-to-market strategies, like at Uniphore, we are always constantly focused on large enterprises as business. So I have a certain go-to-market strategy. At the same time, how do I focus on my SKUs, on my unit economics, and ensuring that my lifetime value of a customer constantly increases as well at the same time. So between both of them, it's important to put the right markets at the right time. But initially, if I am focused on gross margins and letting go a customer, I think I'll be wrong there.
So I just want to switch gears a little bit. In terms of your, you guys have gone through multiple rounds as founders. All of you have done this for almost a decade or more than a decade. Talk about your experience with boards, right? So how do you draw the line? And I've been and watched some of Madhu evolve in this. How do you draw the line between what you need to do as a company versus the advice you get on the board? Or how do you really use the board as a sounding board versus, some founders would talk about getting overly influenced on their strategy by their board. Everybody has a different philosophy. So what's yours, Ravi? How do you go about it?
So one thing, Bala, it is extremely important to ensure in our own minds, right? We as founders have the responsibility to define the vision of the company. And in today's day and era, that vision constantly gets updated and upgraded, right? As long as, first of all, we are clear, then it's easy to drive the board also in that direction. I think a lot of us think that we are getting overpowered by the board, but there are obvious ways to maneuver the board in the right direction as well, and that's our responsibility as founders. The second aspect is that the board should constitute of pretty much all dimensions of the business that you are focused on. A board should definitely have a CFO from outside who can guide you on the right financial metrics, someone from tech, someone from sales. Of course, investors would be there. But these are independent directors.
Diversity of opinion for
Absolutely, it's extremely important. Otherwise, it can be finance skewed, it can be GTM skewed, it can be tech skewed, right? And all of a sudden you figure out, okay, I'm only focusing on one side of the business.
Yeah, that's very well put. And
just to conclude, just to conclude on the final point here, that we at times get over-enthusiastic and then bring both to the operational aspects of the business, which I think there should be a clear demarcation. That is, you are here to guide us on business, we will run it, that's fine. But you keep guiding us, and that's very important because we have not seen this movie before, you have seen this before. And please keep guiding us, but the operational aspects, we'll take care of it, you need to trust on that, that's all.
Ajith, obviously, completely different ball game as a public company, but really my question is that journey, right?
Yeah.
What have you seen And, I'm sure it's very different today, the different set of regulatory and
Yeah.
obligations as a public company.
No, absolutely. I think couple of things, right? Which is that the character of the board changes significantly as you become public. Regulation drives it, but I don't think one should wait for regulation to necessarily start making the right changes, right? I think it's important to start having independent directors a little early on in the journey, rather than waiting all the way till going public. It's one of the things that we did. Maybe in hindsight, we should have done it, with more force than we did, right? So we started out with one independent director, added a couple more, etc. You do notice that the discussion changes, right? I think investors as directors is a great thing. Most investors have the right sort of, right thing in mind for the company, for the founders, etc. But I think there will always be situations where the investor view will be different from what the management or the founders will take. And it's hence important to have that independent voice in the room. And many a times, the independent director may actually point out to the founders saying, please listen to your investors.
Yeah.
It's a valid
Yeah.
point, right? So to my mind at least, both in terms of certain kinds of processes as well as in terms of bringing on board people or independent directors into the company, the earlier the better, right? One of the things that we did, other than bringing on independent directors, for example, because we knew it would be a huge challenge going forward otherwise, was that we constituted what was an audit committee of the board with investor directors on it, just to get into the habit of actually going through it, because it's an extremely important part of how a public company functions. So if you have to get there, you have a lot to prepare for it, right? It tells you as management a lot of what could be things that you don't otherwise think are issues or problems to deal with, but from a very different perspective, when somebody comes and says, oh, by the way, do you run this process? How do you get these numbers? How do you do this? Who checks this? Why does he check it? Why does somebody else not have to check it? I think these are questions which, much later become fairly obvious. Right. But at that point, you have to go through that journey. So I think boards, boards are extremely important from a perspective of actually making a business into a sustainable sort of long-term enterprise, right? And that's
been. And Madhu, for you, it's been a short period of time. You've had multiple investors in different shapes and sizes from 2019 to today. You are also on the path to, I'm not saying you are, but you're on a path to go public. You probably get a lot of different opinions. What's been your experience operationally and strategically with your board?
Yeah, I guess, the first thing is, I had to go through a change of entire investors, as in like prior to probably 2019, I had this VC investors or VC natured investors. So therefore, the board was way simpler, and all that the board cared was growth at any cost. That was the era. I mean that was what was happening during that time. So as long as there was growth, I think everything else is maafed, right? So everything else there is a concession. I think post the PE investors started coming in, the private equity investors coming in, then it was like growth with profitability, with governance, with compliance, right? So I think that was a change that happened. It was good that it happened quite early for us, as in like it's been about like three and a half years now. So that's a pretty different objective what the board wanted to achieve. So they were okay, we invested in you because there was a phenomenal growth, but now we just want it to be kind of mixed with a good compliance, good governance and whatnot. So now I think it is getting, then the larger piece comes. I think then the discussions becomes much more different. The discussions are like, probably if you're in a path to IPO, then, so what are the things that we have to put in place and whatnot. Again, while I say this it is not an easy journey for a entrepreneur founder, because you have to mold yourself at every step of this change in the investor set, that groups that comes onto the board. As Ajith was talking, I think independent directors play a major role. For us, it has to happen early because it's a regulated entity. We run a NBFC, so therefore, by law, even on the onset of the company, we should have the independent directors who has to be positioned. So we could have that experience much earlier in getting this quality independent directors. No, end of the day, see, it's all very specific cases. Specific boards behave specific differently. It's more about as a founder CEO. I think one has to really understand what is the end goal that each of the board member, especially from the investor board member, are trying to achieve, and then probably try to make things out. Probably the founder who has hustled so much to get a company to that level should be able to do all this is what I believe. Yeah.
I think, Bala, the biggest impact of the board is just before the board meeting, when you create the board deck, the realization that you have of your business at that time is just significantly different.
I have look, the advantage of having you guys on a panel is you've just been through so many cycles, so many times that I'm hoping you've formed opinions that, can help a boatload of other people. But let's talk about funding, right? So you've all raised multiple rounds. You've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. You've gone to public market funding. If you look back and you had a chance to revisit your funding, rounds again, what would you advise yourself today, given where you are, in terms of the quantum you raised or who you raised it from, when you raised it? I know there's the general belief that, hey, raise as much money as you can, when you can, from who you can, but let's assume that you have some level of choice, right? How would you think back to, say, 8 years ago?
First of all, it's a never-ending cycle if you start once. Almost a never-ending cycle. But more importantly, the two aspects which are very, very important, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, they have done it themselves. One aspect is the founders or the founding team have to be extremely clear about why they need those funds for and for how long. That's number one. And number two, whom are we taking that money from? Is it just a person who's giving the money or bringing something else along with that investment? It can be.
So when you say that, Ravi, now if you had to go back, would you change what you did?
Not exactly. I think apart from one or two aspects, largely I would not change much of it. The only thing is that the first round that we took was an angel round, right? A lot of angels coming together. We could have done that a little differently because all of a sudden you have a cap table with 80 different individuals, which is like, oh my God, how do you manage it? But beyond that, I think largely it was an okay journey for us.
Okay. How about you, Ajith?
I think different era in which we did all of these things, to be honest. I think the pre-2000 and 18 era or 2017 era was very different. Most of our fundraisers happened where we were left with just maybe one person who was willing to fund us. And when we didn't have too much money in the bank as well, let me also be honest about that. So it wasn't much of a choice, to be honest. But were we very happy with the kind of people we finally got on board and who we worked with? I think without a doubt, absolutely yes. I think they turned out to be the right people. I think today it would be very different. And we did see phases of that in the last part of the funding that we did, maybe in 21, 19 is when SoftBank came in, etc. But otherwise, all of our funding was raised in a very different era. So, if you were to ask me, I like that era better than this one. It was
the new era is the one Madhu is in. So, Madhu, what's your view?
No, I guess I've probably raised about 7 rounds of funding. I think out of which, if I can recall, I think 2 are not necessary. So it was so simple that I had just raised my first seed round. That happened at we raised about 1.8 million, and it was way sufficient for us. Within 3, 4, 5 months after I raised my seed round, there was some random guy who walked into our office. He started talking, saying that he's an investor. He wants to know what we are doing and whatnot. He goes back and then he calls and says that he wants to invest another 2 million. It was unnecessary, it was totally not required, but paisa aa raha to matlab, why not, right? So that was the mindset at that point of time. So I really don't know whether I could have changed my mindset at that time, because as a real young startup, I think having 1.8 versus another 2 million, which is like 4 million, looked very, very sufficient and got a lot of stability to the company. But now if I look at the kind of dilution what we had to go through because of that additional 2 million what it went through, I think it looks like it was totally unnecessary what we did. But see, I think it's more situational on how this funding happens, and at that specific time, what is your position? Looking back, it's always easy to say that there could have been 100 things what I could have done rightly, but also a lot of things are driven by that specific situation and whatnot. I mean, in fact, I had some of my co-founders who were almost of the similar age, a good qualification, good working in a good corporates and whatnot. So two of my co-founders who sat with me, and then they told me that, boss, we have chosen you as a CEO. Your only work is not to sit here and track both of us here with an Excel and whatnot, but you have to just go out and get money. So I was under my own pressure. If I paisa nahi launga to, I might get fired as a CEO here, right? So I mean, situations are specific to that particular point of time. So yeah.
The last question, and I'm going to try to see, I can ask it briefly and maybe request a brief answer also. Just talk to us about, given again the stage you evolved to, just what culture means. I mean, the word just gets thrown around everywhere, right? I mean, culture, this is my culture, that is your culture. But what's been your experience of the positive and the negative side? And again, how have you tried to shape it? Or do you have more respect and value for it today versus when you were there earlier? Ravi, yeah, I'd just love to get that answer from the three of you. Yeah.
First of all, yes, of course, much more respect about the culture than when we coined it at the first time. And we coined it when we were pivoting the business because we wanted to ensure that the organization moves in a certain direction. But culture plays a huge role, and it's important to define it early in the day, then later in the day. We define a lot of strategies, then we execute on a lot of strategies, but there is a way to do it. How are you going to carry forward your organization with a certain mindset is what culture is all about, right? And it can eat strategy for lunch any day, right? And then when you execute some strategies without the right culture, right, it will more often than not go wrong.
But what does that mean for you? Does that mean the way somebody behaves in a given situation?
Absolutely. So at Uniphore, we have multiple cultural elements, right? It defines, is it a high performance culture, or is it a pure people culture? Is it a customer first culture, right? And there are different connotations to it. But like, for example, at Uniphore, we always believe in taking action with responsibility. That's one cultural element. We have collaboration as a culture, right? We have customer first as a culture. And these are practiced day in, day out. So if there is a customer which is facing an issue, right, customer comes first all the time. So people collaborate, people innovate, and ensure that customer issue is fixed. That defines the culture of the organization. And then as founders, our responsibility is to ensure that we communicate the same things over and over again. Because when a person comes in an organization, they have to believe in a certain way, drive themselves in a certain way, and that's the culture of the organization.
That's great. How about you, Madhu?
No, for us, the culture is important. I mean, culture was born in the day we started. I mean, the reason for that is, let me put it this way, right? Among the top 25 people of my company, in terms of their roles and responsibilities, 7 of them are my batchmates, right? And out of that, 4 are my classmates. So we knew each other on, what are we as a person, as towards the work ethics and whatnot, right? So that is one set. The second set of people are people whom I have worked with at least like 5 to 10 years, either as a peer, or a couple of them kind of reported to me. So those are the people who are there. Even the rest of the guys whom we hired is also similar way. It is the tree has kind of grown. So in that ways, without we trying to put an effort of what culture we want to put it across, I think the culture came along as the team itself was formed, right? So today it's very tough for us. I mean, probably that's one reason that I don't have even a single attrition among these 25 people. I mean, we all started very early. Almost like in the first 2 years, everyone else had joined, and we continue to be there. And I think that is culture for us. So that's what defined the culture, and today the company is very different, So if you look at, even talk to about like 25th or the 50th person in my company, they would almost speak the similar language what I am speaking. So in that way, I don't have any issues in exposing any of this, investors like you want to come and do some management interviews and then try to know what is their views and what
Hey,
not.
no bullying on the panel.
and we really don't worry about exposing any of our employees over there. Yep.
Okay. Ajith?
I think two layers as I see it. I think the fundamental layer is basically principles, right? And I think those are principles not in terms of, it has nothing to do with the company. I think there are a set of core principles that are very, very important personally. Things like integrity, for example, right? Like those are extremely core principles, and they form the base layer of whatever else you build as a culture, right? And on top of that, I think very clearly how you live and how you do things, right? Is I think what defines your culture. So I think the core is what it is, unshakable. You have to be extremely clear about that. There are very few principles, but ones where not even a single compromise is acceptable, right? And then you have ways of doing things which work in a group, right? How you actually do. Like, for example, one of the things on that for us is that in general, whichever team you're from, it doesn't matter whether you're from HR, you're from finance, you're from operations, sales, don't come into a meeting without data. Right? Because
example.
we are a company which runs on that. We look, our number of transactions are very large, right? So whatever you do come with clear understanding of the data, right? Now those are ways of working, right? Now that helps people operate, I would say, together efficiently when everybody subscribes to the same philosophy, right? But to my mind, that's something that you can still grow people into. People will get better at it over a period of time, but it only works if you have your basics very well set in terms of what is not compromisable, right? Yeah. So I think for us, it's always been about these two kind of layers operating together. The top layer, in a sense, sort of something which people grow into, while personal principles, I think, are what you actually are, in a sense, you live them, right? You can't really change them.
That's amazing. I'm going to leave it at that. I just want to thank all of you. You're amazing leaders, and your companies are a terrific reflection of what's possible in the Indian ecosystem. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.